As a web developer with over 3 years of experience, I thought game development would be this huge, intimidating leap. But once I got into it, I realized a lot of it felt very familiar. In fact, a lot of stuff carries over from the web. And if you don't believe me, take a look at these two examples. On the left, we have Godot. On the right, we have JavaScript. And they're both examples of event-driven architecture. I'm going to show how Godot and my JavaScript skills line up in some surprising ways. And if you're a fellow web developer looking to make the jump, you'll see just how familiar game development can feel and how you can start creating your own games sooner than you think. Now, before we move on, I'm going to go on a small little tangent, so please bear with me. We first need to understand what is an event-driven architecture and why it's relevant. So let me set the scene. Imagine you're on a web page, let's say this one, YouTube, and you're watching a video. You think, damn, that video was fire. Let me hit like. What happens after you click that button? Let's think about it. You hit like, the count goes up by 1. That's probably stored in the database. And if you were to revisit the web page, the like is still there. All these things that just happened all happened because the button was clicked. An event was handled. The event in this case was the button click. In simpler terms, event-driven architecture is a programming approach where the flow of your program is controlled by events rather than a fixed sequence of commands. Instead of your code running from top to bottom and then stopping, it's always listening and waiting for something to happen. This is primarily done on the web using JavaScript. Now, in my example, I use a button click, but there's a plethora of other events that we currently listen to on the web. Okay, look, that's great and all, but what does that have to do with video games and game development? I'm getting there. I'm gonna loop it in. Give me a second. In Godot, which is, you guessed it, a game engine, it's absolutely covered in events. Like anything you do in your game is basically an event waiting to happen. Your player walks through a door and it closes behind them, that's an event. They hit an enemy with a weapon and they take damage, event. Pick up a key, event. Even stuff you don't even really think about, like the timer running out or a button being pressed in your UI, that's all event driven. You see, I told you I was gonna loop it. I did not deceive you. Anyways, the cool part about all of this is that you don't have to constantly check like, hey, did the player collide with this yet? Did they? How about now? Instead, you'll sit back and say, when this thing happens, run this code. Boom, it's clean, efficient, and super easy to manage once you get the hang of it. Now, through the same medium is how the observer pattern comes into play in Godot, but that's a whole other rabbit hole, and I got a video on that in case you're interested. Okay, let me stop plugging my stuff and let's get back on track. So remember that snippet I showed earlier in the beginning of the video? Yeah, that one. This snippet shows how the two are very similar. In JavaScript, we attach an event listener to the button. When it's clicked, the function attached to it runs. In Godot, we do the exact same thing but with signals. We connect the button press signal to a function and it runs automatically when the button is pressed. Different syntax, same concept. Event-driven code is exactly what makes this transition so familiar for web developers. So now I like to showcase a small Godot project that I worked for a game jam called Shadows Between Us. Me and my girlfriend had only like a day and a half to work on it, which wasn't a lot of time, but we got something done, which is the whole point of a game jam. Shadows Between Us uses events quite extensively, and I think it'll be very helpful to show how those events made our game work and where did we use them and why. Here we have Shadows Between Us. It's a simple platformer without enemies. Yes, you heard that right, without enemies. I didn't have enough time within the game jam to add those things, so it is what it is. Anyways, here's the main menu for the game. This is where we first notice signals within Shadows Between Us. This should be very familiar for web developers since it's a simple button click listener. Anytime we click any of these buttons, we have attached a function that will run when the event occurs. So here, if we go within the script for the main menu scene, we have like these functions that have this green arrow looking icon on the left, like doorway. This means that we have attached this function to a specific event, or within the terms of Godot, to a specific signal. So if we take a look at the button named play and we take a look at the node within the right side of the screen, we see that this pressed signal executes when we press the button. And this is the most straightforward example of how we handle events within Godot. In this case, it's just a simple button click. So now let's actually play the game and I'll explain a few of the signals that we're doing. We click the button click is handled, and we actually launch into the game. The first one that we see that's the most apparent is the signal that actually allows us to climb up a ladder. So here we have a rope ladder, and when we jump on it, it allows our character to go up and down the ladder. If we take a look at the scene, which is over here, we actually have this area 2D, which is this rectangle around the ladder. And if our player collides with it, we actually have this script that executes. So let's take a look at it. If the area that the player collided with was a ladder, then we set is climbing to true. Then within our physics process, we listen to this and then we enable certain behaviors. In this case, we just tell it to not be affected by gravity and just allow us to go up and down by a fixed velocity. And this is the first example of a signal that we use for gameplay. Now, if we walk over here to the left, and if we go over here to the left, we have this key. Now, when we walk into it, this key disappears and this counter in the upper right corner increments by 1. Right here is that we have another event, a similar logic, where we actually have attached an arrow to the key and it waits for the player to walk through it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Those were a few examples of how we use events in game development. And to be honest, the ones that I showed today were pretty simple. And now that you know what to look out for, try and take a look at the games you frequently play and try to spot where events are being used. They're everywhere and they're used for many different things. So yeah, if you're coming from the web, don't think as if you're starting from zero. You've already got a head start and a good one on top of them. It drops right into game development like it was made for it. So here's my challenge to you, the viewer. Fire Godot, throw a button on the screen, and connect a signal to it. If you ever written a single line of JavaScript, you're going to recognize what's happening right away. And once you see it click, you'll realize you're not learning something completely foreign, you're just applying what you already know in a new way. And if you're interested in playing Shadows Between Us, there's a link in the description. With that being said, thank you so much for watching and enjoy the rest of your day. Fog, no, I have to stop hitting that button. Jesus fucking Christ. Fucking goddamn, stop.